Hello, all. Happy January 2024. Let's talk about what's new in PyScript 2023.12.1 and 2024.1.1. I had a pretty good streak of keeping up live streams to go with each and every release of PyScript. But now we have a new accelerated release schedule, which thankfully means the releases tend to be smaller and more condensed, but also means I gotta get back on my streaming game. So today we're covering 2 releases in one video. If you're watching live on YouTube, feel free to put questions in the chat and I will answer them as best I can. If you're watching this after the fact, and I know a lot of you do, feel free to put questions in the comments and I'll answer them the best as I can there. Or you'll find a link in this video's description to our community Discord. If you have a question that takes more than a one-line answer, that may be where I redirect you, but put it in the comments and we'll sort it out together. So, without further ado, let us get right into talking about what's new in the most recent releases of PyScript. Yeah, so I will be doing all of today's demos in 2024.1.1, which is the most recent release as of this video on January 14th, 2024. I don't think there are any major bugs that were specific to 2023-12.1, so we're not gonna, do one version and then do the other. We'll just do it all in the most recent release. So if you are linking to that release, your script tag and CSS link should look like the following: https://pyscript.net/releases/2024.1.1/core.js. And as a reminder, for those of you coming from older PyScript versions, you will want this script link to be a type module. To load this as an ESM module, you no longer need the defer keyword in your script tag. That is true since version 2023.11.1. Defer is dead. Long live module. Yeah? All right, so let's get into the first of our very exciting features here. Let me rearrange the screens a little bit. Yeah, the live chat window likes to come and be on stream, so please forgive him for that. There we go. So the first big ad that came out in version 2023.12.1 is the return of the editor. So you see, if I add a py-editor tag to my HTML here, let's see if that will magically work. It should magically work. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not py-editor. This was a long discussion we had. It's script type equals py-editor, I believe. Let's make sure that's right. Yeah, there we go. Let me shrink that a little bit. So you may recall, for those of you who've been with PyScript for a while, we used to have a tag called py-REPL, py-REPL. The py-editor essentially replaces that. And in the same way that we used to have py-script tags, and now we recommend script type py tags for a variety of web standards and parsing reasons, we did not even introduce a new py-editor tag, which I had forgotten there. It is entirely script type equals py-editor. And when you add that to your HTML and load your page, which I'm doing on the right-hand side here, what you get, and it looks a little funny probably on your screen because I've blown up the zoom on my screen way high, so even if you're watching this on a phone, hopefully you can see the text. What you get is one of these little editor tags where the users of your website can write their own Python right into your page. So I could say, for I in range 6, let's see, let's do some PyScript from PyScript. I guess we can actually probably, can we use print in editors? Let's see. For I in range 6, print I. Then if I hit run, that will run in the py at runtime, and I get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So this is for the case where you want users of your site to be able to write Python code right inside of your web page. And this is not, to be clear, for those of you who may be just coming to PyScript new on this video, welcome. This is not Python. This is not compiled to JavaScript or anything. This is the real deal CPython interpreter running this code right in your page. So we get most of the standard library as well. So I could do, what standard library do I feel good about? From datetime, import datetime, and I'll shrink my font size just a little so we can see what's going on there. Print datetime. If I construct a new one. Oops. Well, you can see I've goofed the syntax, but I actually get a full traceback as well. Oh yeah, missing parentheses and call to print. Did you mean print with parentheses? Yeah, I sure did, Python. Thanks. If I run that again, missing function requirement year, date time. .now. Is that our shorthand for the current date? Yeah, So you can see I'm currently streaming at the year 2024, January 14th at 5 minutes, 34 seconds, and 550 milliseconds past noon, right? So this is the real deal CPython interpreter right in your browser. You can, of course, have multiple Py editors on your page. So if I add an additional PyEditor, script type PyEditor tag over here, and I spell PyEditor correctly, I now get 2 interpreters on my page. So in this one, I'll say x equals 1, and in this one, I'll say print x. And when PyDied bootstraps, were you expecting that? I defined x up here, x equals 1, and I made sure it ran. Let's see, x equals 1, print done, just so we can see that this has actually run. Done. Now I run print x, and I still get x is not defined. Let's show you with another variable. So y equals 1, print y. Y done again. Y equals 1, print y. Name y is not defined. So what is going on here? So what's going on is that by default, the PyEditor is sandboxing each and every editor block to its own copy of the interpreter, essentially, its own environment. So this instance of the interpreter and this instance of the interpreter are not necessarily the same. The same thing would happen, of course, if we had a script type equals mpyEditor, which will be a Micropython REPL, I believe. We'll see if this works. Print, if I could type today, print foo, boop, 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 print foo. Run that, foo, prints out, right? But of course, Micropython and PyEditor are two very different things. So if I say x equals 1, in my PyEdited editor, print done, and let PyEdited run, and then in Micropython I say print x, I should get x is not defined, right? Because PyEdited and Micropython are different enough that they are not sharing an interpreter either. And this is done for isolation purposes. So if you're embedding an editor on your page, by default, PyScript will assume that you don't want to share a global namespace between one editor and the next. But what if we do want to share an editor between one workspace and the next? And that's where one of the key attributes to the PyEditor comes in, which is the env attribute. Env takes a string, and all editors with the same end will share the same global namespace. So let's resave that. So you'll see what's happened here is the labels on the right side of the screen, and they're probably a little small for you, but this little label up here says pyedide-first. This second one also says pyedide-first. If I make another end with an end of second, I have a new editor here that says pyedide-second. And what that's telling me is that this is the global namespace or the copy of the interpreter that that editor is running in. So now if I say x equals 1, print done, and print x, we'll see what it throws up about me here. Done, and 1, right? So now these two editors are explicitly sharing state, right? They are sharing the same copy of the interpreter, the same global namespace, the same imports, the same library. Basically, there is an instance of the CPython interpreter compiled to WebAssembly sitting inside my browser window, and these two code editors say, when I press this button, send them out to the pyedide first copy of the editor, run my Python code, and give me back the results. This second one, though, the pyedide second environment, if I run it, I think I'll get an error. Yes, I get x is not defined because the second copy of the interpreter is not the same as the first. Now, of course, I've named these first and second for the purposes of explanation, but they could be named anything you like. Like, I could have a Jeff interpreter and a Glass interpreter, and the theory would be the same. X equals 1, print x in the same Jeff interpreter, print x in the Glass interpreter. So x equals 1, print x, succeeds. In the Glass interpreter, though, x is not defined, right? So hopefully that makes sense, that we are, able to essentially sandbox our execution into different interpreters by using this env key. So how might you use this? Well, if you have a documentation site, right, that lists a number of different code examples that are all along some theme, you might want a group of editors interspaced among your documentation that says, hey, this These three editors are really part of the same example. I'd like to share state between them. And then maybe I have another part of my page which talks about something new, and I do not want it to share the same state. So I could reuse variable names, or maybe not have the same libraries imported, or so on. So a really simple way to ensure that you have isolation between your editor environments. Now, I'm gonna peel back the curtain. I'm gonna check on something here, because this is actually behaving slightly different than what I expected. But it seems to be, yeah, So because I've been doing a lot of development on this computer, I have some previous service workers running. Let's see what happens if I disable those. See if this still runs. It may actually. Let's see if I check my console log. Yeah, okay. So this is what I was hoping would happen. So right now, with just the page source that you see on the left of the screen, with the script link, the CSS, and the Py editors, when I try and, let's reload this page here, when I just, type x equals 1 and run this, I actually get an error condition. And if I open up my dev console, I see the following error. Uncaught error, unable to use shared array buffer due to insecure environment. Please read requirements at MDN, this very long link. And if you click on that very long link, it will tell you all about the shared array buffer object and what you need to use it. What the heck is going on here? Jeff, you were using this just fine a moment ago. Here's what's going on. The Py editor in PyScript 2023.11.1 and forward is a workers-only concept. What does that mean? So in PyScript, you'll recall, in most recent versions, you can run your code inside of the main browser thread or in a worker, right? So if you type a script type equals py tag and say, let's see, boop, boop, boo. From PyScript, import display hello world. Let's save that. We'll load that up on our page. I get a hello world tag. And this Python code is running in the main thread of my browser, the primary thread, which is responsible for taking care of UI updates, CSS transformations, any kind of calculation or analytics, everything. One thread per page, and this is running on it. But in PyScript, we can also run thread inside workers by adding the worker attribute to our tag. And I could say the same thing. And that thread will run equally as well, but it won't run on the main thread. Let's see here. We'll make sure that I've... Aha! But you'll see that having done that, I should have 2 copies of Hello World, but I only have 1. And when I open up my console log, I see that same uncaught error, unable to use shared array buffer due to insecure environment. Please read requirements in MDN, right? So what the heck is going on with this error whenever I try to use a worker? Essentially, and I won't get deep into the details, but there is a feature of the web, and modern web APIs, called the shared array buffer, which is exactly what that error message is saying it's unable to use, which allows you to share chunks of memory between the main thread and separate worker threads that are doing additional work. Normally, in insecure environments, what you get is the ability to essentially pass strings or numbers back and forth. You see, literally with a message called post message, you say, here's a string message to my worker, send me back an answer when you have one and I'll do something with it, which is a fine way of handling the sort of communication between them, but being able to share a chunk of memory is much more efficient and allows for a lot cleverer things. But you're only allowed to do that if your server guarantees that you're operating in a sort of secure way that allows that memory sharing to be safe. And if it's not safe, your browser will throw up and say, hey, I cannot use shared array buffer due to insecure environment. So how do we solve this issue so we can use the worker threads that we know and love? Well, there's 2 ways. One, if you are managing your own server environment and you can set your headers properly, you can set just a couple of headers in your server, and that will take care of it for you. And I believe I described them in one of the release posts at my blog, jeff.glass. Let's see, I believe it was in the post that we introduce editors. Yeah, we talk about you can add the cross-origin opener policy, same origin, and cross-origin embedder policy require corp. And if you set those 2 things on your header, workers will just work. If you're not a webbish person, and I wouldn't claim to be a fully webbish person, I'm much more on the Python side than the web side, this is probably like, how I wouldn't even know how to begin to set these policies. So there is a much easier solve than setting these manually in your site, and that's to use one of a couple tools that will use what's called a service worker to basically inject these headers for you. And all that takes is you take a snippet of source code written by, in this case, PyScript team member Andrea Giamarchi, or there's a couple other projects as well that will do this, but his is called minicoi.js. You take the contents of that file and stick it in a .js file. I've got one here called minicoi.js. You copy this over, you put it adjacent to at the same path as the HTML file that you're going to serve, and then you link to it in your HTML file. So if I uncomment this, you'll see I have a link to minicoi.js, which is this copy and pasted code that comes from Andrea's minicos project. And then when I load up my page, I'll go back to my demo here, we should see that we now have workers working successfully. I have my hello world printing from the main thread and hello world again printing from the worker thread. So this minicoi.js is a little bit of a hack, but what it allows you to do is to basically shim these headers into places where either you are not confident as a developer that you can set them yourself, or in environments where you can't set them yourself. For instance, on my blog, I run a lot of PyScript, and it's all hosted in a static hosting capacity. It's all in an S3 bucket, where you can't really set security headers. So I just use this minicoi.js project to shim the appropriate headers in, which means that workers work. So going back a little bit, this is what's going to allow us to work with Py editors on our page. You'll recall the last time we loaded up a Py editor without the minicoi.js in place, we had an error in our console. But now that we're shimming the headers properly, we have our editor back in place. For I in range 5, print I. This is also showing off one more feature of the Py editor. If you pre-type code inside of the script tag here, it will be loaded up as Python code when the page loads. So again, I'll run that, and I get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And like I say, this is all running inside of a worker thread. So even if you had some other process going on the page, or this was a very, very long process, it would not block the main thread while that Python executes. So how can I best illustrate that? So this is a very long-running piece of Python code. Let's say for I in range 1 billion, print I. That's going to take a long time to process, and if we did this on the main thread, we would block everything up. But if I add a button here that just logs something to the console, just so I can show you that nothing is locked up on the page, click me, right? Even while my Python code is running in the background, oh wow, that was a lot faster than I thought. Oh gosh, it's still going. Oh no. Even while that thread is still running synchronously in the worker, I should be able to click my button and get high in my dev console here. So even, wow, even though my Python code is really running away from me here, you can see that it's not locking up any of the resources in the main thread, which is what I was hoping to show. This is the fun part of doing these demos live, is sometimes you trick yourself with things you didn't expect. The only other thing to mention about Py editors is they do take a config. And they take the same kind of configuration that a normal PyScript does. So if I say packages equals rich, and I come back into my document here and I say script type equals Py editor config equals config.toml, save that and get rid of the extra parentheses there. In here, I should be able to say import rich, print dir rich. Hopefully this works, and I've got this. Oop. Hopefully this works, and I've got the syntax right. Oh, no module found named rich. Interesting. Is it /toml? This might be a situation where I have to go and check my own blog post and see. Here, let's put that code right inside of our script tag here. Import rich, print dir rich, and run that, and we'll see if I get it right this time. If not, we'll go reference my own blog post and we'll see what we got wrong. Shared environments, Py editors. Oh, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe. So you'll have to forgive me. Since this was a feature that was added in October, we've had lots of discussion about adding configs to editors yet. Maybe we haven't actually done it yet. Oh, I'm so sorry. All right, ignore everything in the last 90 seconds, because clearly this is an unreleased feature. Sorry, everybody. But clearly that is a wanted feature. We've had much discussion about, how do I include packages in my Py editor? How do I have, for example, a script type Py worker that runs some code that is then available in my editor, right? Like, how do I say, like, x equals 1, and then in my editor, I want my users to be able to print x, right? This is not currently possible, not from a technological standpoint. From the technological standpoint, there's a couple different ways we could make this work. From a UX standpoint, from a developer standpoint, we're having lots of conversation about what is the best way to associate these things with each other, right? Is it a script type Py first and this is env first, right? Having this have an env makes a little bit of sense, but when you recall that could have an env and a config, right? Now it starts to get a little confusing. Like, does this config drive this env's imports or not? So it's really a UX issue and not a technology issue, but there's some active discussions going on the PyScript repo about how to make this work. So, and we know this is definitely a feature people want. This is apparently a very common pattern for the use of the old PyREPL tag was, write some code that's going to run and then give my users a REPL to interact with it or an editor to interact with it in. And we don't have that re-implemented yet in PyScript with the new editor. So that is coming and we know you want it. If you have opinions about what the syntax should be to access that or to link a script tag and an editor tag, please come to the GitHub and the Discord, which are both linked in the description of this video, and give us your opinion, because it would be really helpful to have some folks shaping that up. Cool? That's the gist of workers. Play around with them and tell us what you think. I guess the only other thing I didn't mention, although I did it briefly, is that in addition to a script type Py, you can, of course, have a script type MPy, which would be a Micropython REPL, or should be. What have I broken? Oh, yes. So one thing that's currently broken in the Micropython REPL is where if you have a pyadide editor... Oh, this is a script type mpy editor is what I meant to say. There we go. Print 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we did fix that. And just like in the PyScript with pyadide versus PyScript with Micropython, the Micropython, of course, runs quite a bit faster and speedier, though it's, of course, not CAPI compatible with CPython. So the main difference there. Cool. Let me take a quick drink of water. It is minus 25 degrees in Chicago today and very dry, so I'm going to try and stay hydrated so I don't lose my voice by the end of the stream. Give me 1 sec. Okay, let's move right along to ES modules. This is a very cool feature that came out in PyScript 2023.12.1. So one of the neat things that you can do with pyadide and now with Micropython in PyScript, and you've probably seen this before, but in case you haven't, I will share it again, is interact with the JavaScript global namespace. So if I have a JavaScript variable like x, which equals 42, inside of my PyScript tag, my script type Py tag, I can say from PyScript import import window and print window.x. Let's do display just so it shows up on our screen here. Display, oops, sorry, that's wrong. Display window.x. And when I run that, I should see the number 42. So what's going on there, and sorry, I'm just going to bring up a couple of things here. What's going on there is I have declared a variable in JavaScript, and I have accessed it from Python. This is so stupid cool to me. I think it's one of the awesomest things that you can do about running Python in the browser is the pyadide team and now the Micropython team have developed this FFI layer that allows JavaScript and Python to communicate with each other. And that's just so freaking cool. It also works the other way around, that you can access Python objects from JavaScript. So let's again add a button. We'll say button on click equals console.log y. And normally, if that runs, I should have my Python is now erroring because there's no JavaScript variable called x anymore, but we'll fix that in a second. And we'll add some text to our button. And if I open up my developer console here, what I should see when I click log y is uncaught reference error, y is not defined. There is no JavaScript variable called y because we haven't defined it. But in PyScript, if I say window.y equals 1234, then anytime after the PyScript has run, what I can say is log y, and you'll see my JavaScript global scope now has reference to a variable that I created inside Python. So what's happening here is this, from PyScript import window, this window object is a proxy for the JavaScript global namespace in the main thread, which is just wild. And most object conversion just works. You can assign objects back and forth. You can access their attributes. You can say, for example, if I said in a JavaScript tag, var my obj equals a JavaScript object where foo equals 3, then I could say from PyScript import window display window.myobj.foo. And once that runs, I should see 3 being displayed by PyScript, right? So we get attribute access, we can do function calling, we can do all kinds of cool stuff. So this is all awesome, and if you haven't seen it before, you should absolutely go and play with it. But PyScript 2023.12.1 added another layer on top of this, which is working directly with ECMAScript modules. For those who are not super webbish, ECMAScript is technically the standard which JavaScript implements. So ECMAScript is the standard behavior of a coding language which you shall implement, and those who implement JavaScript runtimes for Chrome or Safari or Firefox or what have you are implementing the ECMAScript standard into a language we all call JavaScript. That's a really seat of the pants explanation, so forgive me. But that's when you hear ES modules or ECMAScript modules, we're talking about JavaScript by a specific standard. Yeah. So PyScript added a way to integrate these ES modules, these JavaScript modules, directly into our PyScript runtime. So let's first grab a neat JavaScript module we might want to use. My favorite for demos is the Fireworks.js module. You can find it at github.com/crashmax-dev/fireworks.js, or you can just Google Fireworks.js. It's a cool little library that does animated fireworks on your page. Isn't that cute? And it would be cool if hey, I'd love to write some Python code that makes some fireworks on my page. Somebody's already done it in JavaScript. Can I just hook PyScript into that JavaScript and make it run? And the answer is yes, and now we've made it even easier. So the way that this works is, let's see here. What I really want is the Fireworks.js main page here. If I do Fireworks.js, I want the ESM link is really what I would like. I can go and pull it from somewhere else, but I want to show you all how you would interact with a CDN to make this happen. So let's go to a popular JavaScript CDN like JSDeliver, and let's search for Fireworks-JS. There we go. So on this page, and I'll make it a little bit bigger there, we say Fireworks.js, a simple fireworks library. And it gives you some links that you might want to use this JavaScript on your page. What we'll do is in this tab here, we'll click over to the ESM, the module version of this code, and we're just going to steal this whole URL. So in this case, it's going to be something big and funky like that. Let's make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. Oops. So that is the link to the module version of Fireworks.js. It's in fact linking me to a specific version, which is always good, 2.10.7. So what we'd like to do is integrate this into our PyScript project. And the way we'll now do that is using a new tag in PyConfig called JS modules. In this case, I'm going to use jsmodules.main, and I'll explain why in a second and what the other options are. And inside of my jsmodules.main, that's js_modules.main, I'm going to, as a string, enter my URL equals some name. I'll call it fireworks, right, for ease of use. And let's delete the rest of this JavaScriptiness. Once I've done that, I'll open up my demo page again here. Let's reload so we get rid of that button. Get out of here, button. There we are. What I can do is say from PyScript.js modules import fireworks. Right? And what that will do is import into Python a copy of the fireworks module as a Python object, right? So now this is the JavaScript module represented, directly in Python. So now that I've done that, I have a copy of it, I can work with it just like the JavaScript documentation tells me to do. So let's see, let's go down to some of our examples just on GitHub here. So it's telling me that the way I use fireworks is I do a new fireworks.default container object, and then I call fireworks.start. And container has to be some element on the page that presumably I'm going to put my fireworks into. So let's do that part first. Let's get a container from our page. Let's shrinkify that for a moment. Get our demo here. So the same way that we got a reference to the JavaScript global namespace earlier, I can really simply grab access to the document by saying from PyScript import document. And that document object is the document object of my page in the browser, the same way it would be in JavaScript. If you're looking for documentation on it, if you go to the MDM, the Mozilla documentation on the document object, that is the one we are grabbing. And we can, of course, like I say, we can access all of these attributes and functions and characteristics from Python just like we would in JavaScript. But if you're looking for full documentation on what the document object is, it's a proxy for this object. So just go to the Mozilla documentation. I'll shrinkify that again. Once I have the document object and I have a place to put my fireworks, let's say a canvas with an ID of FW, I can say container equals document.query selector FW. I could also, I guess in this case, do get element by ID FW. And then I'm going to use that constructor we were looking at from the examples on GitHub. So new fireworks, pass it a container, or a container with options it could be. So what's a little bit confusing here as we're looking at it is this fireworks is the fireworks class within the module that we've loaded, right? So what I have here imported as fireworks is really the fireworks module, which I happen to have given the same name as the internal class. Let's actually change that. So from JS modules import default as fireworks module, right? So I'm going to grab let's do import fireworks module. Import fireworks module. Let's just do that. And cannot import name fireworks module from unknown. Oh, because I have to change my import name here and in my PyConfig, right? So this is basically a name that we are making up to say, I want to call the whole module that you get from here by this name. JavaScript modules don't have like an inbuilt name by their file name the same way Python modules do. JavaScript modules and Python modules really not that similar, except they're a thing that holds code. So I've said, okay, import this module as fireworks module, import it here. And now that I've imported it, let us construct a new fireworks. I can say fw equals fireworks module dot, we'll grab this class name, dot fireworks. And then because Python doesn't have this new keyword that JavaScript uses for its constructors, we'll say fireworks.new instead. They basically get a new method, and we'll pass it the container. And then we should be able to say fw.start. And if I haven't made too many typos when this loads up, we have fireworks in the browser. How cool is that? So this is a really streamlined way to get JavaScript functionality into PyScript modules running in the browser. So to recap that process, we're going to be right here. Sorry, wrong button. So the process of getting JavaScript modules into your PyScript is get the module link from your CDN of choice, put it inside this jsmodules.main table in your pyconfig, whose values are URL equals some import name, and you can make up whatever you want. Then inside of your code, you'll do from pyscript.jsmodules import that name that you made up. And that represents, remember, the module, not any of the objects inside of it. And then once you have that, you can treat it just like it was a Python object, except of course we don't have the new keyword, so construct it with the .new method. And it should pretty much just work. That's the gist of using the JS modules functionality as of Python PyScript 2023.12.1. Now, I promised to go back and talk a little bit about this jsmodules.main and why it has .main and what the other options were. And I will. Let me just double check something about the stream here, make sure we're all still in good shape. Yeah, we seem to be okay. So what's happening with this jsmodules.main functionality is that when we fetch this ES module from the CDN and load it up, we have the choice of whether we want to load it up in the main thread or into a worker. And 94% of the time, let's say, where you want it to load up is in the main thread, because most JavaScript modules assume that they're going to be running in the browser's main thread by default. However, depending on what you were doing, you could also have the a need to run a specific JavaScript module inside of a worker thread as well, right? So if you had some JavaScript library that was doing some really heavy lifting math or some kind of asynchronous operation that was very slow that then was going to get processed in a web worker anyway, you probably don't want that module running on the main thread. You could, in fact, have that running in the worker thread. And in that case, what you would do is jsmodules.worker, and that loads the actual JavaScript into the worker thread instead of into the main thread. It doesn't affect where your PyScript runs, right? So let me be perfectly clear about this. Even if I have my JavaScript module running in the main thread, I could still have my PyScript, my Python code, running in the worker thread. I haven't tried this. Oh, it does work. Oh, good. Whew. So now my Python code is running in the worker, but it still receives a reference to and it can interact with JavaScript code running in the main thread, right? So this attribute here controls where the JavaScript goes, not where your PyScript can access it from. You can access that JavaScript from the worker or from the main thread. This just depends where it wants to go. 99% of the time, like I say, you're going to be putting it in the main thread because that's what it defaults to. I don't think this is going to work. I think the fireworks module is one of the ones that assumes it's running in the main thread. Yeah, I think we've broken something here. Yeah, HTML canvas element is not defined. Yeah, so something in this JavaScript is trying to like locate or create a canvas element and it can't. So it's breaking a little bit, but that's okay. The fireworks module is pretty light. It's fine to run it in the main thread. We'll just run our Python in a worker thread so it doesn't take up any extra room. Cool. So this is a super awesome new feature that allows you to like get access to JavaScript modules like directly within PyScript with just a little bit of syntax. Really sweet, really neat, and I'm excited to see what people do with it. We had a demo. This is a good time to plug the biweekly PyScript fun calls, which if you go to the Discord, linked in the description, every other Thursday we do basically a demo day. That's with the core devs and community members and some Python devs and just some like a really cool group of nerds saying like, hey, what did you build with PyScript in the past couple weeks? We did a demo that used 3.js to do 3D graphics, and that can run with the JavaScript in the main thread and the Python at a worker, so we're not blocking up the browser. All kinds of really cool stuff. So I'm really excited to see what people build with this functionality. That is the gist of the ES modules integration in the latest version of PyScript. Cool. Like I say, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat live or ask them in the video below. But if there are none, I'm going to plow right along to our next feature. So let's delete a few things here. Get out of there. So as another recap, you may know, longtime users of PyScript might know, that the way that you add packages to PyScript is also using the pyconfig tag. So if we use pyconfig packages equals rich, then inside of my script type equals pytag, I can say import rich, print dir rich. guess I should probably display it so we can see it on the screen. From PyScript, import display, and oops, I will say display dir rich. We'll just get the members of this module that we've just installed. It's a real easy way to see that it's installed. And you can see the rich module, which is like fancy formatting things, has, OS and print JSON and get console and reconfigure and various members, right? So this is a package that we've just installed from PyPI in the browser, and we could use it inside of our code. So that is the way you have historically always installed packages inside of PyScript with Pyodide, but until recently, there was no way to install external packages for Micropython until now. It uses very similar syntax, so if I change my pyconfig tag to an mpyconfig tag and my script type py to an mpy tag, I can use that to install packages into my Micropython environment. Now, of course, there is no rich package built for Micropython yet, although that would be very cool. So let's instead install the curses.ascii package. I'll say from curses, import ASCII, print dir ASCII. I guess it should be display. Display dir ASCII. Oops. Oh, so I wonder if I can do list dir ASCII. So there is a bug in the Micropython build currently, which has a problem printing out things that look like dictionaries. So let's stick to printing them currently. But you can see, at least in our dev console here, what I get is all of the various enums and names and constants that this ASCII module from Micropython has, including something like a function like isASCII. I'd say print ASCII.is ASCII 1. How about ASCII dot is alnum ? And I should get 1 is an ASCII character, but question mark is not alphanumeric, right? That's what that's telling me here. So where the heck did this curses.ascii package come from? It's not coming from PyPI, because PyPI is essentially for CPython and CPython compatible packages. It's coming from a place called Micropython lib, which is actually just hosted on a GitHub repo and is published statically behind a CDN from there. If you just put the name of a package inside your mpy config, where you're essentially downloading it from is this Micropython lib repository. And there's a variety of packages here. I'll just blow this up a little bit so everyone can see, even on your little phones. We have a variety of core Micropython packages, a lot of which don't make sense in the browser by default, right? The Bluetooth package, where Bluetooth is not really available from within a browser window. But if you wanted to install it, you absolutely could now. We have the Python ecosys category, which is stuff that is popular in the Python ecosystem, but isn't in the CPython standard library. Things like iperf and requests are here. Python standard lib, which is either equivalent or pared down versions of stuff from the Python standard library. A lot of these are built into the Micropython build currently, and there's a link in my blog post to where you find the list of what's already there. But I don't think we build argparse in, because most of the time people aren't passing in command line arguments to Micropython in the browser. But if you needed it, you should be able to. We'll see if this works. If I say packages equals argparse, and I say import argparse, display print dir argparse, and let us side by side these and see here. Yeah, so we can see we've installed the argparse library from /lib/argparse. We can actually see with the install paths is from https://micropython.org/pi/v2/lib/argparse, right? So that's the CDN that this GitHub is building to. Oh, we got a couple of viewers. Hi. Hey, Jeff started watching. What's new? Hi, Jeff. Hey everybody. Hey, thanks for saying hi. It always makes me feel nice. Yeah, we're playing around with the brand newest version of PyScript 2024.1.1 and seeing what's new. So installing packages from this Micropython lib for Micropython use is now super duper easy. You just put the name in here. I will say what's happening under the scenes is behind the scenes. behind the scenes. What's happening behind the scenes is we're making use of an existing MicroPython tool called MIP, and there's a link to this in my blog post as well. And we are basically passing all the strings that you pass to this packages key through MIP. And MIP has some other really cool behavior, right? So if you do mip.install package name in normal MicroPython, that installs from MicroPython lib, right? That's the default behavior we've been seeing just now. But there are other things you can do with MIP as well, like install directly from a URL. So if you have a library or a wheel or something like that that's hosted elsewhere that you want to install, you can just pass that as a key to your packages key in MicroPython. In fact, now I haven't tried this yet, but let's be a little wild. If I have a local package called foo.py and I put some variables in it, and then in my packages key, because it just accepts URLs, I should be able to say /foo.py. We'll see if this gets grumpy. We'll see how robust our parsing is. Yeah, it's trying to parse this. So I think this would have to be a fully qualified URL in order for this to work, because otherwise it can't tell if it's a local package or not. But if I give it the fully qualified URL to my package, I should be able to load that package into mpyconfig and say import foo and print foo.x. Let's see if that works. I got one. Hey, there we go. So if you have packages or modules hosted at a separate URL, you can also just put that URL into your packages key, and they will be basically preloaded into your environment for you. That's a cool feature of MIP. Another cool feature, and maybe I'll go see if I have the demo for this one, is if you have a module that is hosted on GitHub anywhere that you want to install, you can use the shorthand of GitHub : the org/the repo/the file path to install that directly into your environment. And forgive me, I'm going to skip back over to my own blog post here and see if I actually put an example. No, I don't. I guess I didn't. I guess I cheated and did a demo one. But essentially, your syntax would look like, GitHub Jeffers Glass /some project /foo.py. And that would load up the foo.py file from your GitHub repo. Oh, interesting. Sorry, I'm just a little bit distracted by something that's going on my stream monitor over here. I think hopefully the bitrate and the audio are okay. If they're not, let me know, and I'll see what I can do to fix it in real time. Apologies. So in any case, if you are loading a file up from GitHub, you can use this syntax, GitHub : the org/the repo/the path foo.py to load it up automatically. If you're loading a package, there's this package.json format that you can use to specify all of the files in your package to be loaded. That's slightly more in depth than I'm going to get into today. But if you search MicroPython MIP, this is the core MIP documentation. And like I say, we're just using MIP with the web and networking side shimmed out. So all of this functionality is now included in PyScript as well, which is pretty neat. Question here. Hi, Jeff. Sorry for disturbing your flow. I'd like to know if there are any developments in PyDOM. That's a great question. And maybe one that we can answer. We can sort of jump to at the end. I want to talk a little bit about HTML frameworks in PyScript, but I want to do it at the end. I've got a bullet point for that later on. So great question. Let me put a pin in it for now. For those who don't know what PyDOM is, well, stay tuned. I think our last two features will actually be fairly quick to get through for what's new in these most recent releases of PyScript. One is access to the Xterm terminal, the PyScript terminal, in some more advanced ways. So let's clear some things out of here and start fresh. So as of PyScript 2023.11.1, you may recall we have the ability to launch a terminal in the browser. If I have the terminal and worker tags, what I get is a fully featured Python REPL in the browser. Hopefully, if this loads up and I haven't goofed up the syntax again. Let's see here. Do I have any errors in my console? No. Okay. So yes, for I in range 5, print I. Let that rerun, and I get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I want to have a fully functioned Python REPL in the browser, I can start up a REPL the same way I would programmatically in any C Python. I can say from code, import interact, and interact. And that should give me the usual REPL. For I in range 10, print I. Oh, it crashed. Oh no, what happened? Maybe I messed up my spacing. Here, let me reload this. Should get a REPL, print hi. Hi, there we go. So we get an interactive Python REPL in the browser here. So this is a really small change that we have put in here, but like this is very cool functionality. And people have said, okay, what if I want to change the properties of this terminal window itself? Can I grab that terminal window and like change the column size or change the font or the formatting, or like how can I like, you know, mess around with this? We've sort of sandboxed it. So in the 2024.1.1 release, we had added the ability to grab this terminal a little bit more directly. Now, how you're going to do that varies a little whether you want to be doing this in a worker or in the main thread, but I'll show you the method that works in both. So I'll say from PyScript import document, and basically what I want to do is grab this script tag on the page, like this literal script HTML tag, and then grab the terminal attribute of that script tag. So there's lots of ways we could go about grabbing this element, right? We could give it an ID, or we could like just find all script tags and choose the first one. But a pretty reliable way is to say, you know, my tag equals document.query selector. And we want a script tag with a terminal attribute. And let's just double check that I've gotten that syntax right. Yeah, so we'll see when I print that out up at the top of my terminal here, I get an object HTML script element, which is this script element itself. We're sort of referring to this tag proper. So from there, I can say print dir my tag dot terminal, and terminal in this case is this actual terminal representation object that does all of our, you know, formatting and column wrapping and stuff for us. And we can see it has all kinds of useful attributes. We've got copy and paste methods. We've got online feed callbacks, focus. We can grab the element. We can, I don't know what blur. Oh, blur is the opposite of focus. We can defocus it. We can access its buffer directly. So what I might do, what people have access do is like, I want to change the number of columns that this terminal is. So I'm going to say my tag.terminal.calls. I think we default it to 80 characters. Let's set it to something small, like 30 characters. And if I resave that, what I should see is, oops, unless it's crashed, which it might have. That happens sometimes. Ooh, yeah, I've got an error. Set and property trap return property false or property calls. Ooh, it's good. I know I've done this demo before. I may have to go look up what the proper syntax was again, because I do have this calls attribute, but maybe that's only valid at startup time. This is the beauty of writing the release blog post. Is I'm like, hey, I know I wrote this demo before. It's the resize method is what we're looking for here. There we go. So I'll say my tag.resize. How about 30 columns and 25 rows? We'll rerun that, and we should see. Oh, my tag.terminal.resize. Apologies. Just a typo there. I'll get it right first time. Yeah, so now we've shrunk it to, I mean, frankly, a kind of unmanageable 30 columns across. But it does show that the access to the terminal is successful. So if you are doing some programming and you want to have access to this terminal object more directly and mess with sizing or use any of the additional add-ons for xterm.js, which is what's powering this terminal, now you have a pretty simple way of just grabbing this terminal by the horns and doing something with it, right? So frankly, a little tiny change. We've just made one attribute accessible, but I think it's going to open up a lot of possibilities for what people are building on top of this, if that makes sense. Cool. Another little tiny change that I don't think will affect too many of you, but I just think is neat, is document patching inside of workers. So again, we'll clear this out a little bit. So for some background, you've seen me a couple times before access the JavaScript global namespace from PyScript. So if I have a paragraph with an ID of foo, then from PyScript, I can import the document object, and I can print document dot get element dot by ID foo dot inner text. Should probably display that. Display. And when PyDide loads up, I get the same thing again. I wonder if string multiplications will work on this, or if it's going to get confused about the object type. Yeah, there we go. So all we're doing here is we get a reference to the page's document. We grab this foo element using the get element by ID with the ID of foo. We grab its inner text, and then I multiply it by 3 so we can see something's happening and print and display it on the page, right? Fairly straightforward. So some magic that's happening here is that in normal PyDide, right, PyDide being the CPython runtime that we normally use, you have a very similar syntax that would be from JS import document, where JS is the global namespace, whereas we use from PyScript import document. The difference here is that in PyDide, the JS namespace is the global namespace of wherever your code is running. So if you're in the main thread, this would be the main thread namespace. If you're in a worker thread, this would be a worker thread namespace. And that is very reasonable, right? Because you might want to access either of those namespaces depending on what you're doing. But it means that in PyScript, where we're really encouraging people to run their code in workers, some things break, right? Because there is code that assumes that there's code written specifically for PyDide that assumes that from JS import document always gives you the main thread document and doesn't give you a worker. So what we have changed, and here is the change in PyScript 2024.1.1, whether you do from PyScript import document or from JS import document, you get a copy of the main thread's global namespace no matter where your code runs, right? And that is to allow a few specific libraries. Matplotlib is one. Panel may be another, that assume that they are running in the main thread by grabbing this reference to the document under JS. We allow those to still work even if your PyScript is running in a worker, right? And I mention that because some point somebody is going to put from JS import, document or window or whatever into their PyScript code in a worker and expect to get the local namespace, and they won't. You will always get the main thread's namespace. So if you, we have not come across a point yet that's actively caused an issue. If it causes an issue for you out there in internet land, I want you in the GitHub filing an issue saying, I need a way to switch this off. And we'll put one in. But so far, that seems to be a good default for now. So anyway, we're patching this reference to the main thread global namespace automatically now. It seems to help almost everybody. If it's a problem for you, you gotta tell us. Fair? Okay, sorry. Like, I know, a little tiny change, but it may have a really confusing impact on that one person out there. I'm hoping you're watching this. So, in any case. All right, what's left on our hit list here? Yes, I have one more feature, and then I want to talk about some HTML frameworks like LTK. Someone asked in the chat about PyDOM. We'll look at that as well, and then we'll wrap up. So the last feature that I wanted to put in here is just a little bit of UX that we have improved, which is, if we looked a little bit at the pyconfig tag earlier and said, packages equals rich, and import, let's do this from PyScript, import rich, PyScript import display, import rich, display dir rich. Right, so we'll install the rich package from PyPI. Oops. packages is hard to spell. We'll install the rich package from PyPI, and then we'll load it into the browser, and we'll just print out all of its attributes just to prove that we loaded it, right? We've looked at this before. If I have a second pyconfig tag on the page, like that was going to load requests, I get a simple error now that says, too many pyconfig. You have too many. You only need one. And that's because there are lots of ways that this could be ambiguous, right? That we don't want to allow users to have conflicting configurations. The same will happen, I believe, if I have a config on a pyconfig tag and a config specified in my scripts tag. Actually, I had a slightly different error. I get an ambiguous pyconfig versus config attribute error, which is a py0409. This is just saying, like, you can't have an inline config here and this pyconfig tag because they can conflict and be ambiguous what you want to do. So please fix that. Please go and remove one or the other of those. I believe the exact same errors come up in mpyconfig. Yeah, ambiguous mpyconfig versus config attribute, right? But of course, it is okay to have a pyconfig tag and an mpyconfig as well. So if you have pydiide and Micropython running on the same page, and I'm not entirely sure what the use case is there, but you could. There's no reason you can't. I can have my pyconfig package running in the main thread, and I can have my mpyconfig package running. Why didn't that Micropython load? Did I have an error here? Did I goof it? Oh, it's config.toml might be... okay, so I've caused an error by trying to import a package in Micropython that doesn't exist. But let's sub it out for that curses.ascii package we saw earlier. And now we should see both. Yeah, so let me do that again in case you missed it, because the Micropython runs so fast. If I rerun that page, hello from MP shows up almost instantly, and then once pydiide has loaded, it installs the rich library and then prints its attributes there, right? So it's perfectly valid to have a pyconfig and an mpyconfig, or a pyconfig and a Micropython configuration. You just can't have two pydiides or two Micropythons on the same page, because how do we resolve that? And obviously more than two is also bad, right? So that's no good at all. So a little error message there I just wanted to point out because it's new, and previous to this, I don't recall, I think we were erroring but not showing it on the screen, so that might have been confusing to folks. In really early versions of PyScript, like 2023.3.1, I think, or maybe 2022.12.1, this syntax was supported, but was ambiguous. Like, we would do a best effort merge on all of the keys in these packages, but there's some if they conflict, like especially with the new JS module syntax, there's not an obvious way to disambiguate it. So now we just said there's no reason to have more than one at load time, so just please only have one, right? If that makes sense. Again, if you have a use case for having more than one pyconfig, come to the GitHub or the Discord and tell us about it and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. And we'll either say, well, here's a better way to do it, or we'll say, oh, didn't think of that. Here's some syntax updates or something like that. The best way we can find to improve the state of PyScript is to get feedback from people who are building things and integrate them into the core project, or at least say oh, that's not how we envision you using this feature. Here's a different way to do it, right? Which can be equally as good. Cool. I think that is all the major new features from the past two releases of PyScript in 2023.12.1 and 2024.1.1. I did want to take a hot second. Let's see. Can we have pyconfigs in different HTML sheets in the same project? Oh, yes, absolutely. So I think what the question is asking is, let me streamline this example a little bit. So if I have one page that is looks something like this, and I have a second page, I'm going to call it secondpage.html, that has a different package. can they coexist, basically? And the answer is yes. Basically, any single HTML document can only have a single PyConfig in it, but different HTML documents or different HTML scopes absolutely can, right? So my second page.html page here is installing requests and printing out all its attributes just fine. My first page has the rich package and is printing it out just fine. If you had like this second page as an iframe in the first page, that would also be fine, right? It's really just inside of a singular HTML document, only one PyConfig can exist. I don't know how that interacts if you're doing like a PyConfig inside of like a shadow root or something, but that's a little bit in the weeds of functionality here. If you're getting to the point, I should say, that you are installing packages at runtime, like let's say you had some functionality in your site where you wanted users of your site to be able to type a package name into a text box and hit install and have them load at runtime, the PyConfig tag is not the way you would do it. You basically would use either the pyodide FFI, if you're using pyodide, or the MIP program, the MIP package, if you're in Micropython, behind the scenes, and install packages at runtime that way. You wouldn't be like injecting PyConfig packages into the page or anything. This is really just for when the interpreter loads, what's loading up there. So hopefully that makes sense. If I didn't answer your question, hit me up again. Let's see here. I think we'll see if there's any more questions generated there, because I know that's a little bit in the weeds. But while those are coming up, let me show you a couple of cool demos that have come up recently. Let me full screen this. So here, before we get too deep into that, I do want to say, so like PyScript has gotten to this really cool point where we're seeing lots of people building frameworks on top of it, which I love. It means there's a certain amount of functionality there that is worth building on top of. And a thing that people have really cottoned onto, both internally and in the community, is we need, like what React did for JavaScript, we need for PyScript. And React is now a giant, hairy thing, right? You could spend a whole career being just a React developer, right? But in the same way that you have React or Vue or Angular or any of these frameworks that take your base programming language and make it either reactive or give you standardized components or give you new syntax for hooking up listeners or doing dynamic programming or what have you, PyScript is now sort of existing as that lower level, like your JavaScript in the browser, and people are getting excited about building frameworks on top of it that give you more fluent language to actually build fully featured sites and projects on top of. So this is one I really want to share with you. This is the LTK framework by Chris Laffra. You can find it, this demo page is at Laffra, laffra.github.io/LTK. And this will also link you to this LTK link that goes to the GitHub project itself, which is at github.com/Laffra, LAFFRA/LTK. And this is Chris's take on a componentized web library for PyScript. There's all kinds of cool stuff in here, right? So Chris has got a really declarative style for creating things. So you can see, so this page on the left is being generated by the code on the right. So we have this create function that we defined here, and when it runs, it uses all of these additional ancillary methods. Maybe I'll blow this up a little bit more because I know there's some small screens out there. Maybe not too much though. If we call like ltk.text and pass it some text with an unstyled button, I get a label. I call ltk.button and I get a button with the included text and a callback to the listed callback function. We've got buttons with styling using a .css feature. We've got a .hover method. This is really cool. Let's see if I can zoom in on this. So this button here, a button using element hover, which is this. So when I hover over it, it changes color and gets underlined. And the way you write that in LTK is you give your button, you assign the .hover attribute, and you pass it a proxy. And when you do, that function returns a CSS value that, based on the condition of the button, changes its like underlininess and background color, right? So you just pass in a Lambda function that defines what you want your state to be based on the properties of the object itself, and then you just return what you want the visibility to look like. Super cool way of doing things. So there's all kinds of other cool functionality here you can play with. You've got various DOM operations. You can tell Chris was really inspired by jQuery, right, which is one of the primordial and still very extant, I guess library is the way to say it. It's not quite a framework, but a library built on top of JavaScript to make development easier. You got various input elements pre-executed, right? You've got your drop down, your radio button. Oops. You've also got interaction between Micropython and Pyodide. So I didn't realize that button was live, but you can see choose the Python runtime and reload the page. So we had been running in Micropython. Now we're running in Pyodide. So LTK works with both. You get text areas, you get file pickers, you get inputs, various things. So there's a lot of like really nifty pre-built components in here that you can use to build your own site. And there's all kinds of other cool interactivity, right? Table builder, custom card, menu creation, a pub sub model, which is like, I want to send a message out. I want to publish a message and allow a multiplicity of subscribers to receive that message asynchronously. That's built in. There's documentation builder. Like, this is a really cool fleshed out project. So if you're looking to build a site, an interactive site using PyScript, LTK would be a really cool place to start inspecting. Obviously, there is a learning curve here. Like there's a lot of components to look at, learning how the CSS works, learning how the inputs work and how the callbacks are hooked up and things like that. Like, it's not necessarily a lightweight framework, but it is super powerful, and Chris has done a really nice job of building things in. I would recommend, if you go to this demo site and go to the PyData tab at the end, go check out Chris's talk at PyData Eindhoven for some more background on like his thought process behind LTK, which is super cool. So yes, that's one of the probably the most fleshed out framework built on top of PyScript currently. But I will show you a couple more. I know there was a question about PyDOM, and I'm going to close with that after we check out EduBlocks. Edublocks.com, I think, is the app.new. Let's see, is it maybe edublocks.org? App.new. new.app.edublocks.org. Let's see if I get this right. Yeah, there we go. So EduBlocks, for those who haven't played with it before, and here I'm gonna drag that window off the screen and sign in so y'all don't see my EduBlocks username and start spamming me, because I know how the internet works. Let's see, let's log in off screen here really quick and sign in. There we go. There we go. Loading, buffering, signing in. Sorry, I should have done this before. And then I can show you EduBlocks. So this is another product that is meant for like building stuff with Python on the web. It is an Anaconda project now. It's started by this really wonderful man called Josh out of the UK. Anaconda purchased his company shortly after COVID started, something. It's been a few years now, but it's a really cool project that allows you to similarly write Python in the browser, and now it has PyScript built into it. So you get this sort of Blockly based code editor where you can introduce variables, and once you've got them assigned, you can use them in things. And because it's now got PyScript integrated, not only is it generating the code for you on the right-hand side, but if you run it, you get the actual answer, which is 5. Now this is running in Trinket, but if I go to the preview, which I want to say is new, So the old version of this site, which we were just looking at, was powered by a thing called Trinket, which was a Python to JavaScript cross-compiler, and all of the sort of, pitfalls that has. If we run in the new version, which is at new.app.edublocks.org, we get this new adorable loading thing. And now we are running in PyScript in the browser. So a lot of the sort of like weird edge case issues that Josh would have before, because Trinket, which is a really cool project to cross-compile Python to JavaScript, couldn't be perfect because they're dynamic in different ways, those two languages. So now that we're running in PyScript, we get the full Python experience running right in your browser. You want to see this looks fairly similar to PyScript.com in the way that you have a programming area and a preview iframe. Not an accident, right? This is now fully PyScript powered. So obviously, this Blockly sort of framework where you're dragging components around and saying, here's how I want to do an F string. Can I inject that F string in here? Yeah, hello, F. And I can put more text in the front here. Can I put two texts next to each other? I think I can. The value is, and then I can put, and then I can put my variable in here, and I can delete my extra stuff. What's cool about this framework, I mean, there's a lot of things cool about this framework, but one of them is like, not only does it allow new users, frankly, to program with this sort of drag and drop block framework, but it also shows the code that it's generating in real time over on the right hand side. So if you are someone who's new to coding and this is your experience of the framework, it also shows you what the text-based representation is at the same time, and then you can run the code right in the browser using PyScript. Super, super cool. So that's like another way that people are building frameworks on top of PyScript to allow users to create things more easily. Obviously, EduBlocks, I mean, it's right in the name, it has an educational focus. It has this visual metaphor that is for new programmers and new coders. I just think it's super cool because we can run code in the browser easily now. It makes it really, I mean, I wouldn't say simple. Josh has done a ton of work on this site, but relatively straightforward, at least, to say, here is my representation of Python code that corresponds to this textual representation, and then I want it to just run in the browser, and that part, at least, just works, right? So that's super cool. And then the last question that I know was asked in the chat was about PyDOM. So PyDOM is the sort of minimalist internal maybe library framework, what have you, that is built into PyScript. So I think the easiest way for me to show you this is if I go into the PyWeb package on GitHub itself, which is the source for the PyScript project, which if you have comments is the great place to leave them, github.com/PyScript/PyScript. And you get a variety of basically utility classes that allow you to interact with the DOM in various ways. I think what's going to be the best way to show this off, because I hadn't planned on doing a PyDOM demo. And to be honest, I'm not super conversant in it. But you asked specifically about new updates. And partly what has been added recently is some updates to how these properties work. So if you want to create, and sorry, forgive me that I'm thinking rapidly as we're scrolling through here, because like I say, this is an unplanned demo. What I'm looking for is, so one of the things we've been messing around with a lot, and by we I mean Fabio, who's our fearless leader, is how do we want to manage the attributes of the PyDOM package that are going to be very similar to the JS side things. So for example, a JavaScript HTML element has this attribute called inner HTML, which we represent in the PyDOM side by just HTML. Similarly, like content is something that makes sense if you have an element which contains content itself, but not if it's a template element. And that's something that would error for you either in JavaScript or in Python, but now will give you a slightly more Pythonic warning about it, that sort of thing. We recently added, what did we add? Value, I think, was a recent add. So if you have an input element and you want to get the value of it, you can normally access it by just getting, the element dot value. We added some changes to the setter attribute. If the object shouldn't take a value attribute normally, it'll raise this error and say, hey, this is like a paragraph that doesn't have a value. What are you doing? Because that's not like in JavaScript, it is not as uncommon to take an arbitrary object and add attributes to it at runtime. Whereas in Python, well, of course you can, right? You can say, any object that's not immutable dot some attribute name equals 4, right? And that will work, but it's sort of, I would say, bad code practice to be slapping additional attributes on willy-nilly at runtime. In JavaScript, that's like not as weird. It's still not great form, but it's like not as uncommon to have objects being your general like container type. So in Python side, we said, okay, well, if the user is assigning a value to something that doesn't normally have a value, that's probably an error, and we're going to tell them about it. So we'll raise the attribute error and also be really verbose about it and say, if you want to force a value attribute, set it directly using the _js.value syntax. And that is something I don't know if this changed recently, but is maybe worth clarifying, especially for those who are getting deep into PyDOM. When you have a PyDOM element, you always have, I was looking for where it's defined, you always have the option of accessing the inner JavaScript side representation of it by calling its ._JS attribute, right? That's the internal representation, and you can tell it's internal because it's got _JS. But if you really need to get inside, like monkey with the internal object itself, just grab object._JS, and that will give you the internal representation of it. That may help you get a little under the hood if there's stuff that we haven't represented currently. So I don't know if that really answers your full question, and I apologize, I can't think of a good way to whip a PyDOM example up at the moment. Probably as PyDOM evolves, it deserves its own whole demo. And you will find some demos, I think, in the PyScript example repo. But if you have more questions on PyDOM specifically, I'd encourage you to come over to the Discord and ask them there. That's a good place. And Fabio, like I say, our fearless leader, who is the developer and lead maintainer of PyDOM, hangs out over there quite a bit, so you can see him there. I think, unless there are any more questions, and I'm certainly open to them, and knowing there's a bit of stream lag, I'm going to vamp here for just 20 seconds so people have a chance to ask them. But in the meantime, while I'm vamping, I can encourage you once again to find all the places that PyScript already exists in the web. There are links in the description of this video/stream to the Discord channel, where the community and also all the core devs just hang out. It's a great place to ask questions or raise issues. If you have a bug, like an issue, like, hey, this is actually just like wrong, please come over to the GitHub and leave an issue there. We also have GitHub discussions, which are a really productive place when we're getting into the nitty-gritty of syntax or naming or something like that. Discord is great for like a conversation, like, hey, oh, interesting thought. Yeah, a GitHub discussion is a lot better for like, here's 4 blocks of code I need you to read and understand and think about. The formatting and the longevity of it is just so much better on GitHub over there. So in any case, come find us wherever you want. Just don't be offended if we're like, that's a really sharp question. I need you to do code examples for it so I understand. Can you post it in this other place so that we can understand it better? It's not that we don't want the question, we do. It's just we've recognized that like different forums are different, or like better for different kinds of issues. You know what I mean? So we'll see you over there. So the Discord, the GitHub, are the 2 main places you can find us on the web. And of course, if you want to stay updated on what's happening in PyScript, you can follow my blog at jeff.glass. It's one of the lovely things about having a last name that's a top-level domain. I post there for every update and also other fun projects that I do. Couple of thank yous in the chat. Thank you everybody who joined us today on this well, for me, it's a very chilly January day. We have a bit of a blizzard outside. I'm glad the internet made it all the way through to the end of this stream. But if there's nothing else, then I will just say thank you so much, and I will see you for the next release of PyScript. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.